Welcome to On the Same Page, a second-generation series of experiences with nationally recognized and award-winning authors, artists, and creators, brought to you by KET Education and the KET Young Writers Contest. We're glad you've joined us to learn from and collaborate with industry professionals from across the nation, as well as from right here in the Commonwealth. Grab pencils, some paper, and your creativity, and let's get on the same page with today's guest creator.
Hey everybody, my name is Josh, like she said, and let's jump right in. I'm so excited to be here today. So, all right, today we're going to talk about surprise in storytelling, how you use surprises in your storytelling to make your stories more interesting, more entertaining, and more meaningful. So here we go. All right. So the question is, what is a surprise? You probably already know the answer to that. A surprise is something that is unexpected, right? Like this could be an unexpected character in your story. This could be an unexpected event. This could be an unexpected plot twist. Think about maybe if you're thinking about surprises, you might think about you're going to your friend's house and there's a surprise party. You were going there, you thought you were going for a whole different thing, and then suddenly all your friends are there. There's birthday balloons, there's a cake, and wow, I totally did not see this coming. Or perhaps when you were coming to school today, there was a surprise test. Less exciting of a surprise, but still, you were coming in, you were expecting something else, and then it ended up being not what you expected. So in all these cases, surprise is basically something that something unexpected happens. Like you didn't expect Batman to interrupt your presentation like this, did you? Okay, so there's a reason I'm dressed as Batman right now. It was not just to make you, to surprise you. It also has some meaning to the presentation. It makes sense. So I want you to think about Batman for a second. Okay, so Batman has his utility belt, right? And on his utility belt, he has all these different tools for fighting criminals. You know, he's got his grappling hook, he's got his ninja stars, he's got his binoculars. And in the same way, as a writer, you have a utility belt. And surprise is one of the tools that you can use in your stories to make them more entertaining, to keep your readers' attention, to change up the story or even help the meaning of your story. So what can a surprise do for your readers? Well, it can do a lot of things. For one, it can wake you up. You've been reading along and suddenly this new thing happens and you weren't expecting it, and now the whole story is different. Think about how, you were going to your friend's house and then suddenly, whoa, I thought this was going to be a normal thing, and now we have this whole new thing, which means it might also make you curious. Think about how, when a surprise happens in a story, most stories, by the way, begin with a surprising event or a surprising problem that the main character was not expecting. Suddenly you get really curious and you're like, what does this mean? How are they going to solve this problem? What are they going to do about this? In another way, it could also make you laugh. So oftentimes a punchline to a joke is something you weren't expecting. And then suddenly you find yourself laughing. You weren't even expecting that to happen. Or maybe it could make you jump. So something scary suddenly pops up, a surprising, scary thing in your story. But the important thing is, whatever your surprise is doing for both your characters and your reader, you need to remember that it's always going to change your story. Whenever you put something new into your story, whether it's surprising or not, that's going to change how the story works. So think about how, maybe you thought you were going to the dentist and it turned out to be a surprise birthday party. Well, that's going to change what you do for the rest of the afternoon. And it's probably going to change how you feel about the afternoon. So, okay, I have 2 rules of surprises in storytelling. So here is rule number 1. I want you to put on your thinking caps because this is very complicated. All right, rule number 1 is that surprises need to be surprising. Okay, so maybe that wasn't so complicated, but it's very important. So if you're going to put a surprise in your story, It needs to actually catch the reader off guard. I call this the gasp rule, where suddenly something happens and I wasn't expecting that to happen. So you get that sort of reaction. But here's the thing. Surprises can't just be surprising. There's also a very important second rule to surprises. Very important. And that is that a surprise has to make sense. It has to make sense in the story. It has to make sense in the world you've been creating. It has to make sense for the characters. Think about how when I dressed up as Batman, that also made sense because I was making a point about Batman. So I call this the aha rule, where basically the reader, as they're reading, when the surprise happens, they go, okay, I see how that works. I see how this fits in. This makes sense. So you really need both of these things together. So you've got gasp and aha. Okay, so I'm going to illustrate this to you right now. I'm going to tell you a tale of two deer. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that mixed up. I'm going to tell you two tales of one deer, two different stories, and you're going to see it's going to be kind of two extremes of the gasp and the aha. So here we go. Once upon a time, there was a deer who got hungry. This deer got so hungry that he decided to walk through the forest until he found some food. And he ate the food, gobbled it all up until he was so full that he fell asleep. The end. Okay, what did you think? Probably kind of boring, right? Because there was no surprises in it. We had a character who had a problem. There's a deer, he's hungry, but the deer solved the problem in exactly the same way that every deer since the history of deers have solved that problem, by going and finding some food and eating it. So there was just nothing remarkable or unique. So it's all aha and no gasp. So let's see if you how you feel about a second story. So here we go. Once upon a time, there was a deer who had a robot arm and a laser cannon. This deer was hungry one day, but then suddenly an earthquake happened and a cavern opened and a canyon split the ground. How is he going to get across this canyon? Well, I'll tell you how, by a flying pirate ship. So he flew in the pirate ship away into space and hunted space whales. The end. Okay, what did you think about that one? Maybe you liked it a little better because there was lots of surprises in it. You never knew what I was going to say next. But here's the thing, this one is all gasp and no aha. So the story doesn't really make sense. Maybe you liked the individual ideas, like, oh, a space whale, that's a cool idea, or a flying pirate ship, but none of it worked together. So you're not really going to remember this story for the rest of your life. So you really need both the and the aha to fit together in your stories that you're writing. So, okay, I told you I was going to tell you two stories of a deer. I was actually not completely truthful. I'm going to tell you three stories of a deer. This is the third one. It's a book I wrote called Hornswoggle, a Wacky Words Whodunit. Now, a whodunit, if you don't know, is a word for a mystery story where a crime happens and you as a reader is expected to try to figure out who did it. So this is the kind of story that is perfect for putting surprises in. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read it twice. The first time I'm just going to read it straight through, and I want you to be thinking about the surprises in the story and where they catch you off guard, but then also when they make sense. And then we'll go back through and we'll see if we're on the same page about it. So here we go. Deer knew something wasn't right. He felt lighter, uneven, less himself. But it wasn't until he looked in the mirror that he discovered the awful truth. This isn't my antler. I've been hornswoggled. Hornswoggle means to trick. So he hoofed it over to his friend Catfish, who was doing cannonballs in the creek. Catfish, Catfish, it's gone. What is? Can't you see? Some cowardly critter stole my antler. Sorry, she said. I can't see anything without my glasses. When she slipped them on, she discovered the awful truth. These aren't my glasses. What a load of codswallop. Codswallop means nonsense. So they scurried over to Bison, who was kicking his feet up on the porch. Bison, Bison, there's a thief on the loose. A thief, he said. Let me grab my lucky boots. We'll catch up to the rascal in no time. But when he reached under his rocking chair, he discovered the awful truth. These aren't my boots. I've been buffaloed. Buffalo means to puzzle or confuse. So they skedaddled over to the mayor, who was playing croquet with his cabinet. Mayor, mayor, some villainous varmint is stealing our stuff. That's terrible, awful, offensively egregious. Fortunately, I've penned a prize-winning speech that will lift our spirits during these dark times. When he reached into his vest pocket, he discovered the awful truth. This isn't my speech. This is poppycock, humbug, snake oil, horse feathers, hogwash. Poppycock means nonsense. Humbug means more nonsense. Snake oil, way more nonsense. Horse feathers, is this even a word? Hogwash, so much nonsense. Attendez, it is I, famous Belgian detective Pierre Muffet. This is not how we solve le mystère. We must look for clues. We must use logique. We must put on our thinking caps. This isn't my thinking cap. I've been skunked. To skunk means to cheat. It's a crime spree. No one is safe. Where do we run now? Crash. Then they discovered the awful truth. Hey, that's my antler. And my glasses. And my boots. And my speech. And my thinking cap. Fox bowed with a flourish. It's true, she said. It was I who took your things, for I am the greatest trickster in the world. I have hoodwinked emperors and snookered kings. I have bamboozled princes and outwitted queens. Why, just last week, I swapped out the crown jewels with a bag of marbles. Let me show you. Hoodwink means to trick, snooker means to trap, bamboozle means to cheat, outwit means to outsmart. But when she reached into her fanny pack, she discovered the awful truth. These aren't the crown jewels. I've been outfoxed. Outfox means to beat someone at their own game. The end. Okay, so let's see how the ahas and the gasps work in this story to kind of keep you on your toes and keep the story changing. Here we go. All right, so the story opens with Deer, right? Waking up. This is a perfectly normal thing, but then a surprising thing happens. What? His antler gets replaced with a tennis racket. That's very strange. And at the moment, it does not make sense, right? There's no aha. So sometimes when you put a surprise into a story, you're making a promise to your reader that at some point there will be an aha moment. So let's see if it comes up pretty soon. We go to the next page. Deer runs to his friend, and then surprise, it happens again. But this time to Catfish. But now we have an aha moment because suddenly it's beginning to make sense. It's beginning to click. Wait a minute. It's not just one thing. Somebody is going around and taking people's stuff and swapping it out with silly things. And it all, fits these words. So now when we go to the next page with Bison, now we are expecting something to happen. So this is another thing you can do in your stories is you can play with people expecting things and then paying it off by giving them what they're expecting. So in this case, you're like, uh-oh, it's going to happen to Bison too. And then, yep, it totally does. Same thing here. The next page, you flip over, we got this very terribly important mayor. And we're like, okay, as soon as we flip this page, this mayor is going to get hoodwinked. And he totally does. And it kind of creates a fun, like, oh yeah, I knew that was coming. I guessed it, and a payoff there. But here's the thing. If we keep doing this forever, it's going to get boring, right? Like there will no longer be any surprises. So we need to change up the story. So now we have this new character who shows up and he interrupts what they're saying. And he's like, no, you guys are doing this all wrong. You guys are acting like crazy people. We need to use logic. We need to be detectives. And then, oh no, actually it was the exact same thing. So we kind of had a little misdirect there where actually the surprise happened. But of course, there's an aha here because this fits the same pattern as before. It's like, okay, I see. Same, he got outwitted too. So it makes sense that if we've already gone to the mayor and we've gone to the detective, now there's no one else to run to. So they're going to be running, crash, and then surprise, we run into the fox who's stolen all their stuff. But here's the question. Is the fox that good of a surprise? Because if you were paying attention, the fox was actually in the background of every single page, doing her sneaky stuff. And typically also in stories, if you've read a lot of animal stories, foxes are often the sneaky characters. Not always, but they're often the sneaky characters. So the story could end here and it would be okay, I think. You know, like, okay, they found the person, but it feels like something else would probably need to happen to really give a satisfying end to the story, especially if we're doing a mystery and a whodunit. So I think we can do better than a fox as a surprise ending. So that begs the question. All right, so we've got all the animals have been getting outsmarted. What if the fox gets outfoxed? So what would make the best surprise ending here? Would it be bringing in a completely new character? Maybe I could bring in this rabbit. Maybe I could bring in this dog. But I think that would be all aha and not much surprise, because this is the same pattern of the book, right? Like every single page, we meet a new animal, and the same thing happened with the fox. Like we would not have had there'd be no surprise, because it's like, how could I have even seen that coming? Or, okay, so let's say, I think it'd be better if it was a character that was already in the book that would surprise us. What if we had the victims do it? What if one of them gets the fox back? Well, I think this would be all surprise and no aha, all gasp and no aha, because it'd be very, for one, because when did they have the opportunity to do this? They just met the fox. So I feel like that would be a surprise that didn't make sense at all. So we need another character who's been around the whole time, yet we haven't expected them. And so that's where the armadillo comes in, because it's surprising, because remember, a surprise is an unexpected thing. The book has set up the expectations that the armadillo is just there to give us the definitions of the words. It's like he or she is not even a character in the story, but it also makes sense because the armadillo has been there the entire time and is the one character that hasn't. She's been observing everything, knows what's going on. And even if you look at closely, the armadillo is dressed in the same way that the fox was, suggesting that they're both very sneaky. So that is how surprise can work in a story, to keep it interesting, to keep it funny, to keep it, have a satisfying ending. So thank you so very much for having me. I think we're about to do a Q&A. You can ask me questions about surprises, or I would love to hear from you. What's a book that you were surprised that you liked? Maybe your teacher assigned something, or your parent recommended something, or your friend gave you a book and you're like, there's no way I'm going to like this. And it turned out, wow, this was really great. And this is me. These are some of my other books. The Untimely Passing of Nicholas Fartz, actually for your guys of the age, it's coming out in May. It's not out yet. And the other 3 are picture books that I've written you can get anywhere. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So do we have some friends out there who want to ask Josh a question, or maybe share with us? And you could do this in front of the camera, or have your teacher do it in the chat. Maybe share with us a book that surprised you, like Josh's great book that we just got to hear.
We have quite a few people who would like to ask questions.
That's awesome.
Sounds good. Fire away.
Piper, come up to the camera. Okay. The camera's right here.
Hello.
Hey.
I have a question. What was your favorite book that you've ever written?
Oh, man. That is a difficult question. I feel like once you've written a whole bunch of stories yourself, you're going to feel the same way, where you're like, wow, I like all of them for different reasons. I've often heard people say, like, it's like asking who's your favorite kid. My personal favorite right now is actually one that is not out or published yet. I just finished writing a book for middle schoolers, because I love middle school books. Are some of my, like Harry Potter, and some of my favorite books growing up were like The Phantom Tollbooth and The Westing Game and The Hobbit and things like that. So that one is my favorite currently, because it took me a long time to write it, and it's sort of set in a version of my hometown. I grew up on the beach in Florida, in North Florida, in the Panhandle. And so it's sort of set, it's a lot of my favorite things just kind of shoved into one book. But I really like all of these books too. Oliver was my first one. Jonas Hanway is a nonfiction one, so this is a really cool story. I love the art in it. Hornswoggled. I wrote Hornswoggled just because I was like, what is that? What would a book with that title be? And then I'm excited about Nicholas Sparks. So that's a good question. But the one that's no one has bought yet that hopefully will be on shelves eventually, that's my favorite one.
Thank you.
Great question. We also have some questions here in the chat that I can share.
Yeah.
Hadley wants to know if you've written many books, and Amani
Yes.
wants to know what was the first book that you wrote.
Excellent questions. Okay, so let's see, you said Hadley? Yeah. Yes, I have written other books. These are the ones that have been published. If you become a writer, a professional writer yourself, you'll learn that you're also going to write some books that don't get published. So I've written some other ones too, but these are the ones that have actually been turned into books. It's just these three, and then the Untimely Passing of Nicholas Fart is actually going to be a graphic novel series that's coming out in May, and it's called Super Serious Mysteries because the joke is that it's not serious at all. They're all like, the first one is fart related. It's like a who dealt it mystery. So it's like who made the nasty smell. And the second one is like a booger one. So it's kind of gross humor. And then how do I pick titles? That's a good question. So it kind of depends on the book. So one cool thing about writing is that your inspirations can come from anywhere. They can come from all over the place. You just have to be paying attention. So Oliver, the second largest living thing on earth, was my first picture book. And that happened because I was visiting Sequoia National Forest. If you ever get a chance, there's a cool national park in California where they have these giant trees. And they have this one tree that's famous for being, the largest living thing on earth. So we were all oohing and ahhing over this tree. And then I looked over and there's another sequoia right next to it. It's like a couple inches shorter. And because it's just a couple inches shorter, no one cares about it, even though it's larger than any tree you've ever seen in your entire life. And so I was just joking with my family and said, well, that's Oliver over there. That's the second largest living thing on earth. And it was like, that's a good idea. And I just wrote down the first few sentences of the book in my phone. It took me a long time to finish it. But for that one, I just knew from the beginning that I think that character name that's a good title. Hornswoggled, like I was saying, the title came first. So sometimes you might just have an idea for a book cover or a title. And then you're like, well, now I need to write something that's as good as that title. And I think that's a legit way to start a book. So I actually heard, if you've seen the movie Star Wars, the actor who plays Luke Skywalker, I heard him in an interview use the word hornswoggled, and I knew the word, but I was like, I've never heard that used in conversation before. And I was like, I just want to see a book where on the spine it says hornswoggled. What would that be? That's why it starts off so weird, because I was like, I don't even know what a book called Hornswoggled would be about. And actually, similarly, the Untimely Passing of Nicholas Fart, that the title came to me first. I don't even remember how that title popped in my head. So it can kind of be, sometimes you have the title first, or sometimes you find it as you go along. Sometimes it changes. That's a great question.
Oh, listen, Josh, we have so many great questions here. I wish we had time to get to all of them. Here's one that's just popped up. What has been your biggest challenge writing your books?
Oh, wow.
I think that can be so useful to all of us who might be writers or try to write.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the good news is, like, writing is a really valuable and awesome thing to do. And the bad news is sometimes it can be hard. Like, it can be hard to finish a project because it's a lot of work, especially with this middle school book I was writing. The Hornswoggled book that we just read, that's like 500 words. If it often doesn't happen that way, but you technically could write that in one sitting. It doesn't happen that way. Like, Hornswoggled took probably 20 drafts. You know, like constantly trying to, it was always changing and I was trying to get it better and I had friends helping me. But particularly with this middle school book, that's like 50,000 words. So, you know, some of it is the biggest challenge is just getting past myself, because I can put too much pressure on myself and it needs to be perfect. And like that never helps. Like you can't write anything if you're like, oh, this is not good enough, you know. You just got to like write and eventually some, you know, and be okay with writing a messy first draft and then eventually polishing it and making it better. Or like, you know, you'll feel distracted, or, you know, because it's hard work and because often you're the only one making yourself do it. You know, it's not like you got your teacher right now, you got teachers telling you like, hey, you need to finish this assignment. But if you become a writer for a living, sometimes you'll have deadlines, but a lot of the times you're your own boss. And so you kind of have to keep on yourself to keep doing the work, even though it's much more fun to go, you know, watch YouTube.
I think we might have time for maybe one or two more quick ones
Yeah,
here.
Go for it.
So Emma wants to know what your favorite movie is, and Caitlin asks what inspired you to write.
Oh, good questions.
Hmm.
Emily, my favorite movie is it's the Lord of the Rings movies. That's also one of my favorite books. Is Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. He's one of my favorite writers. And so, and I was 14 years old when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out, and it was like that's still, and I've seen it probably 50 times, and it's like 3 hours long. So that tells you how much I like it. So that's my favorite one. And then what inspired me to write books? Honestly, well, first of all, you guys I think are way ahead of me. You're already like doing classes and participating in contests. That's fantastic. For me, it was when I was a kid. I loved reading books. And so we'd go to the library and we had a 20 book limit, and I would get 20 books at a time from the Bay County Public Library. So I just loved reading books. The interesting thing is it took me a long time to figure out that I was actually going to be a writer. For some reason, that just seemed like an impossible, like that. I can't do that. And for a while, I thought I was going to make movies, but then I was working in the children's department of a bookstore, and I was tutoring kids in writing. And there was just all these things where I was like, I've always loved kids' books, because a lot of my favorite books were still the ones I read when I was like your age. And so I started doing it again. So originally, I think the inspiration was just loving books. Like I loved, what are some of my favorites? I mean, I loved, when I was really young, Nate the Great, Shel Silverstein, like I said, The Westing Game. I read everything I could get my hands on. So reading is a really good way to hone your writing skills, because I'll tell you, when I first started, I was just imitating my favorite writers. Like I was just trying to copy, like I was trying to write how Dr. Seuss wrote books, and that's okay, especially at your age. Like you should be copying and imitating and learning. And as you do that, the more you write, you'll start to develop your own style.
Oh, wow. I tell you, I have learned so much today from you, Josh, and I'm sure all of the students out there have. And what awesome questions. I want to thank you all for being with us. And of course, thank Josh for spending his time with us and sharing all of his knowledge and his experiences as a writer. So thank you all so very much. And thanks again, Josh.
Yeah, thank you guys. You were great questions. Good audience.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at, by the way, I've been reading some of the Young Writer Contest like entries like from last year.
Oh,
really
awesome.
Really good stuff. I'm impressed.
We have some talented kids out there. Yeah. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.